Good evening and welcome to the September 12th, 2023 regular meeting of the City of Troy Planning Commission. Copies of the agenda for tonight's meeting are available at the entrance to the room. Agendas and minutes of prior meetings are available on the city website. The meeting will be conducted in accordance with the agenda as presented or amended by the Planning Commission.
State law establishes planning commissions. This planning commission is comprised of 9 residents appointed to serve our community. Members are appointed by the mayor and confirmed by city council. Other individuals participating in the meeting include representatives of the city's planning department, city attorney's office, and the city's planning consultant, Carlisle Warntman Associates.
If you wish to address the Planning Commission at the appropriate point in time, please come forward to the lectern when recognized and clearly print your name and address on the sign-in sheet. Please begin your remarks by stating your name for the benefit of the commissioners. All remarks are to be addressed to the Planning Commission and not to anyone else in the room. If you have a cell phone or any other electronic device that might disrupt the meeting, please either switch it to the silent mode or turn it off. And at this time, I'll ask our Planning Commission Recording Secretary, Kathy Zarnecki, to conduct the roll call.
Mr. Buechner?
Here.
Mr. Faison?
Here.
Mr. Fox?
Here.
Mr. Hudson?
Here.
Mr. Krent?
Here.
Mr. Lambert?
Here.
Ms. Malala-Holly?
Here.
Ms. Parakis?
Here.
Mr. Tagle?
Here.
Quorum present, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is approval of the agenda. Would someone like to make a motion to approve the agenda as presented? Mr. Tagle makes a motion to approve. Is there a second? Mr. Faison seconds it. Any discussion on the agenda? Seeing none, we're ready for the roll call.
Mr. Faison?
Yes.
Mr. Fox?
Yes.
Mr. Hudson?
Yes.
Mr. Krent?
Yes.
Mr. Lambert?
Yes.
Ms. Malala-Holly?
Yes.
Ms. Parakis?
Yes.
Mr. Tagle?
Yes.
Mr. Buechner?
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right. Next is the approval of the minutes from the August 22nd meeting. Is someone willing to offer a motion to approve those minutes? Mr. Fox moves and Mr. Buechner seconds. Any discussion on the minutes? Seeing none, we're ready for the roll call.
Mr. Fox?
Yes.
Mr. Hudson?
Yes.
Mr. Krent?
Yes.
Mr. Lambert?
Yes.
Ms. Malala-Holly?
Yes.
Ms. Parakis?
Yes.
Mr. Tagle?
Yes.
Mr. Buechner?
Yes.
Mr. Faison?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Minutes from the August 22nd meeting are approved, and we're on to public comment for items not on the agenda. Is there anyone that would like to address the Planning Commission for an item that is not on tonight's agenda? Seeing no one rushing to the lectern, then we will move on to the item number 5, which is a public hearing, a rezoning request, file number ZJPLN 2023-0016, a proposed Encore development rezoning, which is on the east side of Todd, south of Big Beaver, PIN 88-20-29-226-019 and 020, Section 29 from R1C, one family residential, and P, vehicular parking to BB, Big Beaver zoning district. No, this is Mr. Carlisle has the honor.
Yes, thank you. Good evening. So tonight before you is a proposed rezoning. A little background. The applicant is requesting to rezone 2 parcels. It's located at the northeast corner of Todd Drive and Butterfield Road, and the request is to rezone it to Big Beaver zoning district. The 2 parcels are currently zoned. One is zoned R1C, one family residential, and the second one is zoning P, parking district. Just for a little context, this is my excellent graphic that I spent all day working on. For context, the parcels in red are the proposed parcels being requested for rezoning. If the Planning Commission remembers, those parcels outlined in yellow have come before you. Not the Benihana one that's farthest to the west, but the 2 to the east came before us as a concept for redevelopment of those 2. Those 3 parcels are owned by the same applicant and or in partnership with other partners for those 3 parcels. So those 5 parcels are all owned by the applicant. The parcel outlined in blue is an O office zone parcel, which is not part of the requested rezoning. In previous conversations with the applicant, we did ask about the ability to either obtain that parcel and or have that parcel be part of the rezoning request to do it all at one time. The applicant, and he can fill in more detail about it, was not able to get a partnership for that parcel, and that parcel owner was not willing to participate in the rezoning at this time. So For context, the two parcels in question are the ones outlined in red. However, it's important to understand that the ownership and the development potential with some of the surrounding parcels as well. The site is that yellow star is master plan for Big Beaver and is surrounded by Big Beaver zoning. Big Beaver future land use. The current zoning, as noted, is both P and single-family R1C. It would permit single-family residential use and parking for an associated use, probably parking for the uses up on Big Beaver. The existing zoning really is limited to what could happen there and is consistent with the master plan, which does call for Big Beaver. The proposed rezoning is a straight rezoning, so there are no conditions offered by the applicant as part of this request. If the rezoning is approved, a future site plan would come in before this commission for consideration, but they would be afforded, if this is straight rezoning is approved, all the rights and conditions that are permitted under the Big Beaver District. There are 5 standards that the Planning Commission is well aware of with regards to a rezoning. Is the rezoning consistent with the master plan? Will the rezoning cause any or increase any nonconformity? Can it be served by public services and facilities? Will the rezoning or will it not impact public health, safety, and welfare? And will the rezoning ensure compatibility of adjacent land uses? Mr. Chairman, you're asked to hold a public hearing tonight, consider public testimony, and consider the standards set forth in the zoning ordinance and make a recommendation to the City Council. Again, the Planning Commission is a recommending body on this action to the City Council. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Carlisle. Any questions for Mr. Carlisle? Yes, Mr. Fox.
That zoning district where it's just P parking, do we have a lot of zoning that's just specifically for parking?
I'll give my best answer, and Director Stout and I can give you a lot more history. I kind of call it a legacy zoning district. There are a scattered number of parcels that are Zone P, and it was a zoning designation in the previous zoning ordinance that was kind of used as a buffer from more intense land uses such as one on Big Beaver to adjacent land uses, typically single family. So it's a carryover. You see this kind of some transition. It was used as a transition zoning. We don't use it anymore. We don't rezone anything to P. We're in the habit now of more rezoning stuff from P to another district, but really is a legacy district that was used as a transition between different land uses.
Thank you.
I couldn't have said it better.
Okay. Any other questions for Mr. Carlisle? Okay. Seeing none, we'll have the applicant come up and sign in, please, and introduce yourself, although we've seen you before, so.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the Planning Commission. Jim Butler with PEA Group. Address is 1849 Pond Run, Auburn Hills, Michigan, 48326. I think Mr. Carlisle did a very good job outlining our proposal for request to rezone the 2 subject parcels from R1C and parking to Big Beaver. As Mr. Carlisle pointed out in your ordinance, Section 16.03C, there are 5 particular requirements for rezoning. So I'll offer these in response to those. The rezoning is consistent with the master plan, which designates this land for Big Beaver District. The proposed rezoning from R1C to P and P to Big Beaver will not increase, will not cause or nor increase any nonconformity. The proposed rezoning will not have a significant increase on public services, facilities created by the proposed development of the property. The proposed rezoning will not have any impact on, will have minimal impact on public health, safety, and welfare. And the proposed rezoning to Big Beaver will be compatible with the surrounding land uses. So if you have any questions of myself, Jason Amami from Encore Development is here also as the owner. He certainly can answer any questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Biegner.
Can you tell us a little bit about what you're thinking about doing there?
We are currently working on a mixed-use site plan, incorporating the 3 parcels that were pointed out in yellow and these 2 parcels. And we've got a few things we're still working out, and hopefully within the next month or so, we'll come forward to the staff with a conceptual plan to start the process.
So those 3 buildings in yellow would change?
The 2 buildings to the west, where the retail building, Diamonds International is, and then the, I can't think of the restaurant.
Benihana.
There we go, thank you. They will remain. The parcel along to the east, that building will come down. So development of that, and then probably the back part will be mostly parking to support those.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant? I have one question for you. When you came in front of us, I think sometime last year, and presented a concept plan for the front parcel on Big Beaver, at that time, it wasn't a formal hearing, it was just you asked for some feedback, and I think generally the commission was favorable, but they expressed some concerns about a straight rezoning and how it might impact the adjoining properties. And I think the commission, although we cannot ask you or require you to come with conditional rezoning, it was a suggestion that that might be a better approach. Is there a reason why you're coming to a straight rezoning for this back parcel now instead of looking at the whole property?
I mean, Jason Hamama with Encore. Hi, everyone. No reason. I mean, I think the Big Beaver District, obviously, for future developments, because we do have if we one day acquire the parcel in the blue, that can potentially be a phase 3 of the development. So pretty much coming in now and getting it rezoned now will open up the door for the next phase. But this is all tied to that same reason we came in a while back. So why we didn't come back sooner, I call it a roadblock. We had a tenant, potential tenant that was interested in just putting a freestanding building there. So, wasted 6+ months of going back and forth, but we're back at our original plan.
All right. Any other questions from the commission? Okay. Seeing none, all right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And this is a public hearing tonight, so if anyone wishes to address the commission on this item, they're welcome to come forward to the lectern at this point in time. Seeing no one coming forward, we will close the public hearing then and bring it back to the commission for action or questions. Yes, Ms. Parakis.
It's not action or questions, but I just want to, my position on this one is that it doesn't satisfy section 16.03C5 of the zoning ordinance because we can't ensure compatibility with adjacent uses of land, unfortunately. If you recall, or if you drove by there, we recently approved and now we see it built. There's that residential apartments to the east on Butterfield, and to the south, of course, we already have an existing residential place. So if we do a straight rezoning to Big Beaver, they could come with a 16-story, 15-story building and put it there. And it's true that we can argue that it doesn't, it's not compatible or there's no transition, but it's a lot harder at that point to work, work with them. I would have much preferred to see a conditional rezoning where they actually brought us the plan, and that way we can really make sure that we're respecting the neighbors. And there's also to the west a green space that's undeveloped at this point. So I'm not really sure how a Big Beaver zoning would ensure compatibility with the adjacent uses of land. That's my position.
Mr. Fox?
I'm personally of the opinion that I think it just makes sense to get this rezoned now. At the site plan step of the process, we'll be able to step in and say, hey, we don't want a 15-story building here. I think it's consistent with the master plan to switch this over to BB. I, for one, think it's odd that we even have P zoning, so there's part of me that just thinks let's just get rid of that, you know what I mean? So for me, any potential future problems can be caught during the site plan review stage. That's at least my take on it. I think it makes sense. This is kind of just almost more of a procedural thing so that they can go and come up with whatever plan they're going to come up with, and then we can pick that to death when it comes here, you know what I mean? We can rip it to shreds if we feel like, but that's my take on it.
Okay, Mr. Biegner?
Can I ask Mr. Savanagh to address Ms. Parakis' thoughts, please?
Yeah, there's one thing, you stated there are apartments next door. They're actually owner occupied. That was I remember when we spoke with the applicant during pre-app meetings, that one of the conditions of sale was that they not be rentals because the owner who sold the property was in the apartment business and he didn't want to compete with those units. Not that it matters, but just for the record, they're for owner occupied. So the standard when it talks about compatibility, Ms. Parakis is correct insofar as we don't know specifically what's going to be proposed there. Mr. Butler, representing his client, gave us a bit of an indication of what could go there, but there's no obligation. So the only thing that we have that we know for sure is that when we talk about compatibility, we have to look at what's permitted in the underlying Big Beaver zoning district, and there's a range of different uses and different building forms that could go there. So from the standpoint of really being able to predict compatibility, not without knowing specifically what's there, it's all we can rely on is what could be there, what could go there based on zoning, and Ms. Parakis is correct. There could be significantly higher buildings on that site than is located to the east.
But then it would still be up to, we'd have some say if that came about, right?
There are standards. So when Mr. Fox, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, Mr. Fox, what you said, I think tear it to shreds. I believe what you meant to say was that we would apply the standards of site plan approval to the application fairly and reasonably. I think that's what you meant to say, but I don't want to put words in your mouth. But we would have site plan approval standards that we would apply to the application at that time, just as we have rezoning standards that we're applying to this application at this time. They're different standards, but we are to apply them as appropriate.
Thank you.
Any other questions, or does someone want to float a resolution? Nobody raised. Oh, Mr. Faison, go ahead.
Resolved, that the Planning Commission hereby recommends to the City Council that the R1C and P to BB rezoning request as per Section 1603 of the City of Troy zoning ordinance located on the east side of Todd, south of Big Beaver, PIN 882029, 226019, and 020, within Section 29, being approximately 1.49 acres in size, be granted for the following reasons. One, the proposed rezoning is consistent with the master plan. Two, the proposed rezoning does not appear to cause or increase any nonconformity. Three, if rezoned, the property will be capable of accommodating service and facility loads caused by the use of the development. Four, the rezoning does not appear to impact public health, safety, or welfare. Five, the rezoning will ensure compatibility with adjacent uses of land.
I'll second. Second, Mr. Krantz seconds it. Any discussion on the motion?
I would just
Yeah, go ahead.
make one point. My motion is not to discount Ms. Parakis' point. I think it's a valid point, but I think Brett's point, prevails that we apply site standards and transition as part of that, and that's part of our purview.
All right. Mr. Beekner.
And I'm also a fan of Mrs. Parakis' comments every time. I drive by this parcel as much as anybody does, and I'm very interested to see what happens here. So we'll look at this and just make sure it's done right, in my opinion.
Yes, Ms. Parakis.
I'd just like to say, I'd also like to see what's developed. I guess I just feel that with a conditional rezoning, then we know exactly what's going there, and we contain more, we have more control, as opposed to them coming and saying, we have the right to do this, and we have to apply the zoning standards, the discretion that we have within, but it is harder. So since they don't have the right to Big Beaver at this moment, it's easier from this seat as a planning commissioner to sort of watch what happens from a conditional rezoning.
Any other discussion? I would just, kind of echo the comments. My concern is that when we had this meeting previously with the applicant, we talked about the front property. The feedback we gave was we would prefer a conditional rezoning, but we cannot require that, but that was our feedback at the time. So I will reluctantly vote no on the resolution. Any further discussion? Guess we're ready for the roll call.
Mr. Hudson?
Yes.
Mr. Krant?
Yes.
Mr. Lambert?
No.
Ms. Malala-Holly?
No.
Ms. Parakis?
No.
Mr. Tagle?
Yes.
Mr. Biegner?
Yes.
Mr. Faison?
Yes.
Mr. Fox?
Yes.
6 yeses and 3 nos.
Motion passes. And this is only a recommendation that goes on to City Council next, so I'm sure Mr. Savinan can let you know when that's going to come in front of City Council.
Yeah, I don't have a date yet.
All right, thank you. All right, we are on to the next item on the agenda, which is public hearing, revised preliminary site plan and amendment to a conditional rezoning agreement, JPLN 2023-0018, proposed homestead site condominiums, east side of Livernois, north of Big Beaver, PIN 88-20-22-301-007 and 008 and 009. Section 22, zoned RT, one family attached residential zoning district. Mr. Carla, do you have the honors again?
I do, thank you. So again, another project the Planning Commission should be fairly well aware of. In 2022, a conditional rezoning was approved for this site. It's a 9.5 acre site located on Livernois, just north of Big Beaver, across from Town Center Drive. That proposal, that conditional rezoning was approved for 30 one-family attached units or stacked flats. It was 3 parcels, and again located on the east side of Livernois, just north of Big Beaver. It was conditionally rezoned at that time from R1E to RT, one family attached. The applicant is seeking to amend that conditional rezoning, maintain the RT zoning, but amend the rezoning to change the building type from attached stacked flats to detached and reduce the number of units from 30 to 14. We do note that one family detached is a permitted use in the RT one family zoning district. Due to the change in the character of the development and the proposed change to the site plan, this does constitute a major amendment and does require a public hearing. Again, the Planning Commission is a recommending body on this matter, and ultimately the City Council will make the final determination. So the plan in front of you is the 2022 plan. It was approved again to construct 30 units. The 30 units would have been distributed in 5 buildings with 6 units each. We do note that the rear of the site will remain as undeveloped in the form of retention pond, community park, and preserved wetlands. And there's a lot of discussion on the preservation of those features. The 2023 plan changed the unit type from, again, the attached stack flats to detached, reduced the number from 30 to 14, but does maintain the rear of the site as undeveloped in the form of the retention pond, community park, and preserved wetlands. So there's really no change to the back end preserved area of the site. In comparison, the changes are reduction from 30 to 14 units, a change in the unit type, a change from for rent to for sale product, loss of a small neighborhood park, which is, it's hard to see where it is, but it's located, if you look on the screen, it's this little kind of area with a little circle, and there's a gazebo and some other things there, which is located in the north central part of the old site plan. A reduction of approximately 2,000 square feet of impervious surface, as well as they've reshaped the detention pond. So when the Planning Commission considers this, again, some points to consider is the Planning Commission spent a considerable amount of time talking about this application before, and specifically talking about the missing middle or the lack of the missing middle and where it's appropriate and how we obtain it in the city of Troy. We do also note that through the master planning process, the Planning Commission again spent a lot of time talking about missing middle, what's appropriate, what's not appropriate, and specifically the idea that missing middle should be a transition and is appropriate along major mile corridors such as this. In response to some of those questions that we raised at our level, the applicant did claim that they still find this to be considered missing middle housing because they are providing a smaller housing product than currently exists in the market, and they are maintaining a first floor master bedroom and bath. So that's part of the consideration of the Planning Commission. There are 5 standards similar to the rezoning application we heard just before us. Again, they're very similar to the previous standards. Includes If the conditions proposed would protect public health, safety, and welfare, is the proposal consistent with the master plan? Are the conditions proposed in accordance with the terms and provisions of the zoning district? Can this project be served by public facilities and services? And lastly, are the conditions proposed ensure compatibility with adjacent uses of land? Okay, so that's the rezoning part of it. We do note that the site plan is also a condition proposed as part of the application. So we did do a site plan review. It's in much more detail in your packet. But essentially, the building envelope or the building area where they're going to be building is essentially the same. There's some slight changes. And so we really reviewed it from the changes from what was previously submitted. Again, that back rear end of the parcel will remain as it was originally approved for. Some of the questions that consideration we had was, we note that there is no dedicated guest parking on the site. It was unclear from the application if there is street parking or not. We would request that if there is not street parking, there should be some area of dedicated parking. Preferably, they can widen the street enough so there would be dedicated guest parking on the street, but it's a point of question for the applicant. In review by the fire marshal, they do note that this is considered a fire lane, and so they shall identify that and sign it accordingly on the plan itself. So again, that raises some questions about where guest parking can go on the street. Confirm the material of the trail. It was unsure what the material of the proposed trail within the system was going to be. Again, clarify if the community park is open to the general public or simply for the use of the residents of the development. If it is open to the general public, easements will have to be provided to allow for access. Again, if it's open to the general public, how is the accessibility of the park going to be provided? Are people allowed to walk on the sidewalks to get back to the park? Is there, again, guest parking? Are people allowed to park in the street and walk back there, et cetera? 6, provide a long-term maintenance plan for the community park. And lastly, provide a photometric plan. Proposed renderings of the proposed homes. I believe this rendering shows them as the optional second story, but I can have the applicant clarify this. So it's stone, brick, and hardy board siding. There are 3 site plan review standards. 1, the development shall ensure compatibility in the transition between land uses. 2, the development shall incorporate architecture best practice building designs. And 3, enhance the character, environment, and safety for pedestrians and motorists. So as a summary, Planning Commission is asked to hold a public hearing. As part of the deliberation, the Planning Commission should consider if the conditional rezoning standards have been met and if the site plan design standards have been met as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Carlisle. Any questions? Yes, Ms. Malal-Hawley.
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Sagdant or Mr. Carlisle, there is no way you can stop somebody who wants to come into the subdivision and onto the trails. Any person walking on the sidewalk can always come in, right? So I'm just curious, the back part of this development, which has trails, and you mentioned that allowing public access, what actually is the process that one would follow for that? Because according to me, if I were walking on the walkway, I could just make a right, walk through the roads and get myself onto the trails. Just curious, how would that be done?
So I will answer this, and I'm sure the city attorney will jump in where I'm incorrect. So our assumption, this is going to be a public road. With public roads, there are public sidewalks. However, those public sidewalks end where the public portion of that sidewalk ends, which would generally be, I would assume, in this somewhat location, this area. And unless, as part of the discussion about what the future use of the site's going to be, this could be either private and maintained and operated by the homeowners and used excessively and only by the homeowners, or as part of the discussion we're having is this going to be allowed to be open and allowed by the general public? And if so, there has to be what they call an access easement allowed to the general public to allow them to access that back portion of the property. So it's part of the discussion tonight, and it's one of the questions we raised is the plan to have that open to the public, under which they would have to have some sort of public easement as part of this project? Or are they planning on only allowing people to use the public sidewalk, stopping there, and then in theory, not letting people, the public, go back behind into the rear portion of the site.
I guess what I'm not understanding is how will you stop somebody from walking onto the trail? That's, how can that be done?
Signage, HOA regulations, it would be enforceable by the HOA. I'm not sure the Troy Police Department would get involved, but it would be private property and say no trespassing if that's the case.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Ms. Parekis.
Yeah, I have a question, and maybe it's for Ms. Dufresne, but when I look back at the notes when we looked at this the first time, I thought that we had agreed that that the applicant had put into the conditional rezoning that it was going to be open to the public. And so I would have thought that would, if I'm right on that, when it was, the terms were drawn up, that would remain the same, but maybe I'm remembering it incorrectly.
You know, I'll be honest, Ms. Parekis, I did not go back to review the prior conditional rezoning. I do remember that discussion, but I don't have that at the tip of my tongue.
Okay, I think the notes in this packet, I could have sworn I read that they had agreed to that. I know it wasn't in the resolution, but we'll ask the applicant, they're here.
That is the reason why I asked that question, because when I remembered we had some public access discussion on the prior property.
Okay. Mr. Hudson.
Ms. Parekis is correct. There was a long discussion on the ability, the permission as it being open to the public or private, and my memory says the developer agreed it would be public. Let's expand on that a little bit. The proposed amendments use a word which I think should not be involved, and that is they would retain the ability to make a trail. And that's where we had a lot of discussions. We were contemplating, and I thought it was implicit in the colloquy between the petitioner and the board that there would be an easement and a trail connecting the citywide trail system as part of this development. And I say the word ability is, it's a weasel word. It shouldn't be in there. He may have the ability to do it, but he wouldn't necessarily have to do it. So I can say this, I am not requesting that he do that because it's a conditional rezoning. But my observation is that it should be open to the public and that trail should connect with the citywide trail. And if it can't be done, I've got a problem in approving this conditional rezoning.
Okay, so I am looking back at the conditional rezoning agreement. It is in Article 3, conditions 3.4, conditions offered by Tableau, number 11. Tableau shall grant an easement for public ingress and egress to the city of Troy over the walking path connecting to Livernois, and then there's an attached Exhibit B. So we did address it in the prior conditional rezoning agreement.
Yes, Mr. Savinant.
Yeah, and I don't want to speak for Mr. Maniaci, but the challenge for the city and Mondrian at this time, or Tableau at this time, is that the property immediately to the north, they do not own. So at the time, there was some dialogue, or they were going to initiate dialogue or what have you, to see if there was interest in providing an easement to the city to provide an easement to the north. So the partnership of the city and Mondrian was unable at that time to have a connection, but they were willing to provide an easement to connect in the event that we were able to get an easement to the north.
Thank you. Any other questions? Mr. Fox.
I was just curious, does the city maintain any generally accepted best practice as to what should be considered missing middle housing? Because I mean, the developer can say, we view this as missing middle. Is there like anything from the MAP or like any of the organizations that the city is connected with that has like a generally accepted definition of what missing middle actually constitutes?
There's pretty significant literature in the master plan that talks about missing middle.
Okay.
Provides a a range of different options, different unit types.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Carlisle or Mr. Savanen or Ms. Dufresne? Yes.
Maybe
Mr.
one
Faison.
question following on Mr. Fox's question. So these homes are 1,900 square feet? And that,
1,900 square feet ranches with an option to have a second-story bedroom, I believe, and maybe bathroom. Option, it's an option.
so when I reviewed that, my opinion was the smaller footprint, the first floor master seemed to be consistent with missing middle. Is that a fair assessment? Okay, thank you.
It is, yeah.
Any other questions for Mr. Carlisle? Seeing none, we'll then have the applicant come up and I'm sure can answer some of the questions that have already been broached here.
Good evening, and thank you for having us back. Again, my name is Jim Eppink. I'm representing tonight Joe Miniacci and Mondrian Properties. Richard, partner in the company, is also here with us tonight, so we're happy to answer any questions. I'd like to come back to the reason for our request for an amendment and really kind of jump right into the trails, because I think that was a good question. Essentially, I think the original approval was to have the trails as public access, a public easement put over it. There will be a connection all the way out to Livernois. So from a public access point of view, with the original plan and with this plan, there's public access right from the public road at Livernois. Our road is proposed at this time to be a private road, but with a public easement along the north side. The north sidewalk on our plan is 8 foot wide, which would be consistent with the trail system in the city of Troy. It would go throughout the trail, the entire trail. The entire eastern portion, the back portion of the trail would be asphalt. As it goes in front of the homes, it would be concrete. So concrete right from Livernois over to an asphalt trail with a connection or the ability to connect. Mr. Hudson, the way that was conceived is we will build that trail right up to our northern property line. The ability, I think, was in reference to working with the city of Troy and whether or not really it would be the city of Troy would have the ability, we certainly will help participate, but to work with the adjacent landowner to create an easement on our neighboring property, the assisted living home, which would connect essentially the dog park down to this, and then it would pick up onto our trail. So is the ability, we couldn't guarantee that the adjacent landowner would grant that easement, but we agreed to work with the city to work towards that. Our trails will be public and be able to be publicly accessed from Livernois, where our hope is that it would help create that loop up to the dog park and then further north onto the trail system. So the trail systems, as we are proposing those tonight, are unchanged from what was considered and approved from last time. Now, in terms of the reason for change, again, appreciate Mr. Carlisle, Mr. Savanon's review of our plan that was just essentially a year ago, last September, and we had proposed going from R1E, which is the smallest of the residential zoning types in your city, to a conditional rezoning that allowed 30 stacked townhomes, essentially. Those townhomes were the majority of them, 21 of them, were going to be 1,830 square feet. So just slightly smaller than what we're proposing tonight with the 1,900. We did have some uppers that were more in the neighborhood of just under 1,400 up to about almost 1,600, but still within that missing middle size. What we immediately found as we started to market the approved plan, in the nature of development is not just to build everything, but to ensure that there's a market as we build, both from right from the start in terms of lending and everything else. we've agreed with the city's master plan that part of the missing middle is not only about keeping our children in the city of Troy and making sure that there's affordable places to live, but there's a huge population, as we know, of families that have these big, beautiful homes here and are downsizing, their kids have moved out, and they don't want to leave the city. And so part of that missing middle is to attract residences for that people my age and older. What we had proposed and what we thought we hit the nail on the head was to capture that group. What we came to learn very, very quickly, and frankly, from our point of view, a little disappointing, is that we were missing 4 key items. Number one, apparently when people downsize, they don't necessarily downsize their vehicles. And we were proposing single-car garages with single-car driveways. What we learned very, very quickly is everybody wants a 2-car garage and a 2-car driveway. So in terms of guest parking, it gives us 2 in, 2 out, plus street parking, which we'll get to. Our previous plan didn't have basements. Just because we downside doesn't always mean we downside our stuff. And so people were just unwilling to, whether it was for sale or for lease, really enter into a home without significant storage. The second was that we had single-level living, but we had some on the first floor and some on the second floor. People, once again, were saying, hey, that's great. That was probably the least impactful. We could probably overcome that to a certain extent to have some people living on the second floor, but a majority of the people said part of that downsizing, missing middle is first floor masters, first floor living. And then, interestingly, a lot of people say, yeah, I want to downsize, but I don't necessarily want to feel like I live in an apartment. I still want, essentially a single-family feel. I want 4 walls of my own. What they love is total maintenance, snow plowing, lawn cutting, landscaping, maintenance-free living, single-level living, but not necessarily apartment living. And so Joe and Richard and their team went back to the board and say, okay, what do we do? I think developers don't like to give up density. That is not, always a goal, but getting things right is the goal, obviously, and making sure that we have a viable, successful project, not only for Tableau, but for the city of Troy. And so we went back to the drawing board, went back to our architects, went back to our marketing team, and essentially tried to accomplish those things. What is a moderately sized home? If we were at 1,830 before, we're up to 1,900. Yes, you can have kind of a grandkid room up on the second floor, but you still have a master and a second bedroom on the first floor. So we're essentially the same size, 1,900 square feet, but with a basement, with a 2-car garage, with a 2-car driveway, and then with 4 walls of my own. And unfortunately, from a development point of view, we went from 30 units to 14 units, so we cut it by about 53%. But we know we got it right, and we know that this will be a beautiful project and something that will absorb very quickly and be successful in the city of Troy. Interestingly, if we compared it again to R1E zoning, first question I said was, well, what does the underlying zoning do? If we're not going to amend the consent judgment, what happens if we just go back to the R1E? We really, because of the environmental and the land balancing and some of those things that we talked about last year, those haven't changed. We kind of have the development zone up in front, and we've got it. R1E would actually achieve 12 units on this property as opposed to 14. So we think it's very, very similar to an R1E. We think it's better because in this case, it's a detached condominium, meaning that we're not selling lots, we're selling buildings, homes. And with that comes total lawn maintenance, total landscaping maintenance, snow plowing, all those amenities that come with that empty nester, missing, and I guess that's beyond missing middle, but the small homes are missing middle, but it's that empty nester lifestyle, that maintenance-free lifestyle. And so that was really what prompted us for those changes, is to get it right. From an engineering point of view, again, it's almost identical, and certainly the land balancing, engineering, the floodplain issues remain the same. The shape of the pond changed slightly just to make it more efficient. Our landscaping remains the same, the buffering remains the same. And so all those things that were part of our original condition remain part of the condition now. We're really just asking for the amendment, as Mr. Carlisle pointed out, to go from 30 to 14, to have those additional amenities, to go from for rent, for sale. I can talk about that in a minute, but some of that has, or all of that has to do with the economy of the cost of rent has gone up because of interest rates and building materials. So there really isn't a differential. It's almost less expensive now to buy. And with this kind of move down demographic, we're seeing again from our marketing that they just don't want to rent for those really high prices. And then the public access we talked about. So we're excited about it. We appreciate the consideration. We hate to come back to you and, say we wanted one thing and now we want something else, but we just don't want to get it wrong. So, appreciate it.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Epic? Mr. Krent?
Well, I want to say that I like the newer plan. I think it's a better plan. I like how you showed that there's an 8-foot wide sidewalk. Is that shown in the drawing that looks wider than the other sidewalk?
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct.
My only concern is guest parking. So what do we do about guest parking? I know you've got the 2 spots on the driveway, but if they're having a graduation party or something, or whatever family event,
Yeah.
there's no place to put cars.
We've actually got significant, so I'll answer your question directly, but by comparison, we've actually got significantly more parking per home on this site than we did last year.
Yes.
So maybe, to your point, maybe last year's wasn't quite perfect yet. But in terms of guest parking, the way I count it, we've got 6 spots per home at least. If everybody, we've got 2 in the driveway, 2 in the garage, 2 in the driveway, 2 in the garage, and 1 on the street. And the way I calculate that is from a fire access point of view. We would obviously work with your public safety, but ideally have parking on one side of the street. We've got enough room for 2 cars in between each driveway. So between each driveway on one side of the street, one's for me, one's for you. So that's where I get my 5th. So 1 off-street, 4 off-street, 1 on-street per home if everybody had a party at the same time.
I still don't think, as much as I'm in favor of keeping the green space and avoid impervious surfaces for, water reasons, I don't think it's sufficient, knowing my neighborhood. Some parties have 30 to 40 cars, and Ms. Paracas has seen it just like I have, and they park on my grass too, and they've wrecked. But that's another issue. But the point I'm getting at is it's really, I'd like to see some other solution for a surface that does allow water to permeate through and be like auxiliary parking for parties. You've got that green space up in that northern area. If that was some kind of a surface that supports vehicles but allows water to go through, I think it'd be a necessity almost for this kind of development. Other than that, I think I like the architecture. Everything about it is great. And the idea of the trail system and public access, it sounds like the public access will only be walking or biking from Livernois. There's no people driving to go on this trail.
Yeah, it's not a park per se. It's ideally a continuation of the trail system. So it's for pedestrians, it's for bikers, it's for those type of things. I think we're certainly willing to work and look at, I am looking at the plan, look at different ways to introduce some guest parking. Perhaps we can extend some of that permeable pavement to the north and to the south of that T intersection. It wouldn't get a lot, but it would get a few more spots. What we would certainly want to make sure is that that would be reserved for residents or the guests, as opposed to encouraging people parking there and going on the trails and, kind of avoid trouble at nighttime and those type of things. But I appreciate what you're saying. I think there might be a way. Where I know projects have been unsuccessful is I think it's building number 10 there. You could say, boy, I could put some perpendicular parking, but those become their side and backyards too, and so we don't want to have too much parking right up against people's backyards, but perhaps maybe as many as 3 at each end. That would give us 6 more 6 more parking spots potentially in the neighborhood.
Well, I've seen it in our neighborhood where on a large party, a few of the guests park on the party owner's lawn because there's no other place to put them. So
Yeah.
I'm just trying to avoid that situation from occurring in a new development.
No, I think that's a good point. We'll work towards that, but again, I do think that I always hate this answer, but I'll go, we know we meet your ordinance, we know we exceed your ordinance, but I understand the real-time operational concerns that you're bringing up, which are valid, and so I think we can work towards that to feel. I'm less, from a planner's point of view, an aesthetic point of view, I'm less, my first default would not be to create like a mini parking lot, but to see where we can fit a couple spots.
Okay, thanks.
Any more questions? Yes, Ms. Parakis.
Yeah. First of all, I want to tell you that I appreciate the fact that you guys, before you built something without getting feedback, you took the time to do that and then adapted to what you heard. I think that's a great idea. And personally, I really like the architecture on these new cottages. They sort of have a modern flair, and they're still cottages. I think they're nice. Before I ask you my questions, my first question had been about the street parking, but I wanted to comment and build upon that. I was just in Birmingham last week, and one thing that I saw that they were doing was they were putting gravel sort of, it looked like it was on people's properties, but from what I understood from the homeowners there, it was actually considered public and anyone could park there, but it was sort of on people's properties. And so they're off the road, but they're, it's not pavement, it's like
Crushed limestone or
yes,
something
exactly.
like that.
And it doesn't look terrible, and apparently anybody's allowed to park there. It's like a parallel parking spot. So it's something you could consider on the opposite side of the trail. I'd prefer to see something like that as opposed to building parking lots at the end of the T.
Yeah. We'd have to look at that from an engineering point of view, because right now we know we're going to have curb and gutter, and so we'd have to think of some type of a mountable system, or there's an answer in there somewhere.
Okay.
We'll figure it out.
I did have a couple other questions. I was wondering whether you considered the possibility of connecting the trail system with your southern neighbors, and I don't know if they'd be interested in that, but there is a residential neighborhood street from Big Beaver that comes and sort of ends right in that area, and I wondered if you would consider opening that up so the trail can continue on down to Big Beaver.
The only thing that we'd have to contend with is the lane drain, which of course is, I believe, county mandated. There's an awful lot of regulation as it, involves crossing a drain or potentially damming up or plugging a drain. I wouldn't say that we are necessarily against that, but we'd have to investigate, is it possible, and what those restrictions would be, and then what those costs would be, to build a bridge or those type of things. But if it's possible, I guess, without speaking to Joe and Richard, I think it's a good idea, and we can certainly look into it. I'd hesitate to add it to the site plan now without knowing, is it possible and what would it cost?
Okay. Could I ask one more question? This is just a question about, you've spoken to it already, but, some other builders might be like, you're crazy, you've got permission to build 30 units, and you're going down to 14. And we talk about our master plan and bringing density closer to Big Beaver. So I am just curious, did you consider doing anything sort of maybe an in-between? Like, I know you gave all the reasons for why you're doing them single family, but have you ever considered duplexes or fourplexes and just being a little bit more dense? Exactly what you're doing in terms of basements, driveways, garages, but having them be connected in that way so we get that density back a little bit.
Talking to primarily what we think is the market for this area are the current Troy residents downsizing. They really were attracted to, I think you said it best, is a cottage type feel, modern farmhouse architecture, very, very popular, very, very cool. But it's still high quality, beautifully, it's my house. It's my four walls. The duplexes, I think if we were in a more quote unquote urban area, even though we're, if we were in more of a Royal Oak or maybe even closer to kind of the action down at Big Beaver on the other side of 75, something like that type of density is probably going to attract a little more of a younger crowd and would probably be the right place to do it.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Malal-Hali.
Thank you. So since the density has come down, I take it the price of these homes would have increased. I know it is 1,900 square feet, so it's still that middle spot that we're looking at. But how high will these houses be selling? What's the price point? Yeah.
Well, that's hard to say, just given the fact that they probably won't be up for another 18 months, and so that price will always change. I've gotten in a lot of trouble over the years saying, hey, this will be this much. I either say too high or too low. What we will say is they're going to be market rate houses for that 1,900 square foot. They're going to be well built, so they're not intended to be an entry-level house per se, for a young professional right out of college or in their 30s, unless they have really good jobs. But they're really meant to be that move-down house with still good Troy quality. So if they go with the second floor option, it would be about 2,250 square feet, down to 1,900 square foot based on that.
I do feel parking needs to be addressed, especially for the guest, but I still don't want it to, I don't want motorized parking for people to then come and use the trail.
We agree.
There has to be some kind of a happy combination here where we provide access for the residents so they can house their guests temporarily, but at the same time, not make it into a publicly accessible parking lot, which, considering the size of this area, it's going to be too difficult to manage.
It would get congested. The dog park, a lot of public parking is just immediately north on the other side of our neighbor.
Yes.
There's across the street in the Civic Center. So I think people from other parts in the city who want to use the trail will use those spaces. The people that we see kind of accessing this is maybe someone on a long run that's trying to get down to Big Beaver, or other people who maybe live in the townhomes across the street will cross and walk through. But it's probably more walk-by traffic than destination traffic.
That would be the ideal for this location. Yeah. And last but not least, just looking at this picture, I kind of spent a couple minutes looking at this picture. This is such a well-balanced graphic of development and green space. So thank you for that. And yes, I do like that the density has come down a little bit. And I do like the fact that you didn't make it into big, large homes, but you're still keeping that 1,900 kind of middle housing market that we need in Troy. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Mr. Fox, then Mr. Faison.
See, I kind of want to jump in, and there's been a lot of talk that your ideal demographic would be like empty nesters who are looking to downsize. And I would kind of want to ask the question of, if your plan is to hit at kind of an older demographic, why do you have those big green fields? I guess to me, when I see a trail wrapping around big green field, I picture kids running through there. I picture children taking advantage of that space, playing games, running around, etc. I used to live in Somerset Park, and literally every bit of that green space covered in children. And I guess I kind of want to go to bat for another demographic, and that is young people who do want to get into Troy. They do want to move into nice areas of Troy, but they don't necessarily have that capital to make an upfront purchase on a house. I mean, this is where my wife and I found ourselves in for years. We were just trying to find a way to like permanently put down some roots in the city, but the housing stock was just not reachable. But we were happy because we could move into an apartment. We didn't have the down payment, but we could live in an apartment, we could live in Troy. I very much would like to see a version of this plan that's almost a hybrid of the two worlds, where we've got these versions of the housing that's kind of aimed more at empty nesters, but then some duplexes and some housing that is kind of more attainable for someone who is in that younger demographic, who wants to get into the Troy School District, start a family, and kind of place down some roots here. Because to me, I feel like what'll end up happening if you have a bunch, and God bless empty nesters, absolutely love empty nesters, but what are they
it's
gonna
awesome.
use the field for, I guess is my thought. You know what I mean?
No, it's a great question. So, and I'll kind of say that's probably my fault with the graphic. What we spent more time on last year going through the plan, I'd be happy to go through it in more detail, is that the site essentially, as we move further east, it's lower, and there's a floodplain, and that floodplain extends somewhat towards the western half. Part of the process of this will be balancing the site, essentially building up slightly the western half, lowering the eastern half. And so part of that, the darker green is an existing wetland which will remain untouched. The lower area is that lane drain and its natural buffer which will remain untouched. But that center green area will be graded and kind of balanced with the front of the site and with the detention pond. The intent of it from a landscape point of view though, and we're putting in trees, we've got butterfly gardens, we'll have that path, but really working with the neighbors immediately to our south last year and working with the city, the intent is to let that essentially reforest. So even though it looks like a soccer field, the intent is that it would be the asphalt path mowed down, a few feet on each side so it doesn't get overgrown, but to really encourage that to kind of return to nature. There's a lot of talk about different, habitat that traverses this area. It's connected to some larger green spaces. We want to make sure that we return some of that green space to our southern neighbors. And so probably my graphic more than anything makes it look like that's what it'll look like, post-construction, but the hope is that reforests pretty quickly.
Well, I guess first off, I want to say thank you for that explanation. That actually sounds fantastic for the fields. I'm a big fan of that aspect of the project. I am curious your thoughts on the point that I brought up in terms of opening up the variety and potentially having a couple of different types of housing going into the development. I'm from an urban planning point of view, I love mixed use, not only mixed use commercial and retail and office, but just mixed housing use. In my experience, it works on a bigger scale, better. We have a 9-acre site here, and we're really only using about 45% of it with only 14 homes or 14 buildings. And it's funny, in most cases, people say, oh yeah, I wanna live near different people, I just don't wanna live real close to those different people. And so what we see in mixed use neighborhoods or mixed housing neighborhoods is we'll have a little cluster of townhomes and we'll have a cluster of single family homes. And they might be across the street from each other, they might share a park, they're all within, a very walkable, all our kids know each other, they all go to school together. But when I look out my window, I'm probably looking at another townhome or I'm looking at another single family. And so on a smaller site like that, it's more difficult, in my experience, to achieve that. On a bigger site, I think it's a cool idea.
Mr. Faison.
Yeah, a couple things. One comment. I like the new plan better than the old plan. I like the size and the footprint of the home, so I think it looks great.
Thank you.
And I have a question for staff. I wanted to know, Ben, I know you called out parking in your report. Guest parking. We've talked about it a bit at the table. Are they deficient per the ordinance for parking?
No, we do not. We do not have so we require 2 parking spaces per home. They essentially, Jim, are those 2-car garages? I can't tell.
2-car garage with
2-car garage with
drive.
2 spaces. So essentially 4 spaces per unit. So they exceed the parking by ordinance. What we note though is, and I think Mr. Krent has alluded to, is that there are times when people have guests and whatever, or people have 3 cars and they don't park in their garage and they park on the street, that there needs to be some relief valve of overflow parking for guests and other operations. In a neighborhood, they're connected to additional streets, so they can park on streets maybe around the corner, except, but you're isolated. You're in and out from one point. So we just think it was not clear from the application if there is going to be on-street parking. If there's on-street parking, probably guest parking is probably sufficient. But with the comment of the fire marshal about the fire lane and needed signage for that, and the the uncertainty of whether this is on-street parking, we just raised that question for discussion. But to answer your, a long way-winded to answer your question, they meet the ordinance requirement for required parking for each unit.
And then one question to the applicant. So you said there would be on-street parking, right? Or
That's
is
always
that
a
in this
decision of the fire marshal, but the roads are wide enough, based on the city of Troy, to have parking on one side. The fire marshal will make that final determination. It's our hope that there's parking on one side of the street.
Thank you.
Any more questions for Mr. Epping? I just had one quick question. Mr. Carlisle asked a number of questions about the park area in the back, and is that going to be maintained by the homeowners association, or how exactly is that going to work?
The way it was agreed to last year, my understanding, I think last year there's a few representatives from the city, I don't know if it was Parks and Rec or DPW, was that the trail and a swath next to the trail, I don't remember specifically, but 4 or 5 foot on either side of the trail would create an easement, and that easement would be dedicated to the city, and the city would maintain the trail as part of its trail system, ideally helping connect it to the larger system. The park itself, which really isn't intended to be mowed, but there'll be some maintenance involved, would be the responsibility of the homeowners association.
Okay, all right. And you mentioned also that the trail itself, once it gets past the homes, is going to be asphalt covered?
In the back, asphalt, in the front, concrete.
Concrete,
Correct.
okay. Good. Any other questions? All right, would you have a seat?
Thank you very much.
And this is a public hearing, so if anyone from the public would like to address the commission, I see one gentleman approaching the lectern, so you have 3 minutes to address the commission, and Mr. Savadent has the control over the time, so as soon as you sign in there, he'll turn on the switch and let it run. Which light is it that says he has a minute left?
I think it's yellow.
Yellow, okay, kind of like with the traffic light, so. All right.
Where's the light? Oh,
Good evening.
good evening. My name's John Phillips. I live at the end of one of those streets. And as far as I know, talking to my neighbors and on other streets, no, we do not want a connection past the drain. We like our dead-end street being dead-end and very quiet normally. I do see that I did request a site plan, but I never received one from the planning board. I sent an email, but got nothing. So I'm going with what I'm seeing right now. The builder's now saying that they're doing a basement. My concern with that is they're in a flood zone, even if they do pile over. And as of, I believe it was the end of last month, we had a flood in our area that exceeded the 100-year floodplain area. It went almost all the way up to Heartland, which is the next main street, flooding the entire street all the way almost to the end. So that has never happened before. And that was on just one rain. We've had other rains recently that have approached that level of rain, but not anything like that before. For the green space, I hope they put it back to forested area. It's nice to walk through a nice forested area that's somewhat maintained. Last time, I believe it was undetermined base for the walking path, and now it's blacktop. My other concern for the buildings, are they within the height limit of what we had originally agreed upon? I didn't hear any comment on that, and I didn't have any site plan to look at. As for your parking, I would recommend somewhere on the northern part of the T, create a crushed gravel area, mark it as parking for HOA residents and guests only. That would alleviate your problem of having people use it for parking for the walkways. Or currently as far as I know, there's no sidewalk on that side of Livernois. So I would recommend just having them walk from the dog park if they have large parties and so on. And that's just like one complex away. But I have talked to my other neighbors, and our main concern is we'd like to keep the wetlands and the trees and the non-view of people as much as we can there. So if the green space is now going to be reforested. We're good with that because we like our trees, we like our quiet. And that's why we decided to live on the end of on a dead-end street, and we were told that would never be building on the other side. I understand that the owner wants to build something there. The other question I have for the Planning Commission is, could they reduce it down to 10 buildings? That would give them more enough space on the T area to have additional parking if that was one of the concerns. So, and my other concern is the pond, a retention pond, because we've already had flooding issues over the last 2 years in excess of we've ever seen before, and that retention pond gives me concern because the green space there is going to be flooded whenever there's rain because they're taking dirt out of there to build up where they can build. So, thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from the public? Seeing there are no other ones, we will close the public hearing and bring them back to the commission for either further questions or for a resolution. Mr. Savin, do you have a comment? Maybe a question you can answer is the height of the buildings. I believe it was 2.5 stories is what?
Two stories.
2 stories, okay.
I'm irritated that you requested a plan and didn't get a plan. So when you leave here, you're going to go out, you're going to turn left, and on the right-hand side is the planning department. You're going to grab my business card. My name's Brent, and tonight or tomorrow you're going to email me, and I'm going to send you all these documents. I apologize. We pride ourselves on being responsive. I didn't see your request, and we want to get you that information. So this is a recommending body. It still has to go to council. So prior to council, you'll have all this information, okay? So again, I apologize for that. Couple things. When this went before the Planning Commission the first time for 30 units, we talked at length. A lot of neighbors were here and were concerned about flooding and drainage and et cetera, and we went into great detail about how this, at the end of the day, was probably going to help alleviate flooding, and it's actually going to help with the cutting and the detention, and it's going to give us a chance to do some maintenance, et cetera, and it's going to actually be an improvement to the neighbors. So the cutting of trees is necessary for cutting and filling, but at the end of the day, it's going to, the goal is to make things better from a water perspective. I misspoke earlier on, and I want to call myself out a little bit. Mr. Fox asked me about missing middle, and I looked at the master plan. It's a little bit like the missing middle definition is a little bit like sustainability. Depending who you ask, everyone's got like a different take on it. But I went to the master plan. So characteristics of missing middle as per the master plan: walkable context and sense of community, transitional density, smaller, well-designed units, and de-emphasizing parking. Those are characteristics of missing middle. And it shows a diagram that shows kind of a spectrum. And while it does list out single-family units, the spectrum in the master plan the least dense starts at attached single-family and goes from there to bungalow core, townhomes, fourplexes, live, work, and then courtyard apartments. That's that missing middle between single-family and the really high. I tend, in the context of Troy personally, I tend to look at these types of single-family homes as missing middle because they feature, for this type of unit, features accessibility, they improve this accessibility, and as well as adaptability. But one of the goals of missing middle is attainability, and I don't know what the price point is of these, but it's one of the goals of missing middle, generally speaking, is something that young people and old people would want to live in and are attainable for both. I don't know if it fits that strict definition, but I just wanted to kind of let you know that I did look it up, and as per our master plan, it does seem to hit some of the notes, but if you look elsewhere, it's debatable.
Yes, Mr. Utzon.
This is more of a question regarding form instead of substance. But, you know, a court always speaks to its written orders. I assume the Planning Commission also speaks through resolutions. I'm looking at this proposed resolution. You know, I've got no problem with it, except we've, I think, made some decisions tonight which are not reflected in the proposed resolution. And I'm wondering, maybe Julie can tell us how we'll resolve that.
Well, as you know, Mr. Hudson, this is conditional rezoning, right? So any conditions that we're going to put on this need to be offered by our applicant.
Well, okay, let me go to open community garden. There's a question here in the resolution, clarify. Have we clarified it? If so, should not the resolution reflect that? I mean, it's a conditional rezoning, but we ought to be able to take a look at a resolution and say exactly what happened in reaching that solution.
For sure, as long as it accurately reflects what the applicant is agreeing to do. The problem is, you know, the applicant's conditions need to be in writing, right? So we can.
Everything they have said tonight verbally does make a what a difference. It's what's on this proposed resolution.
Whatever's said here today needs to be put down in writing. I'm assuming that Mr. Abdo will send me a proposed draft of the conditional rezoning to review, or amended conditional rezoning to review.
Yeah, you're very eloquent, but I just want to make sure that what we've decided is reflected in the resolution.
So, Mr. Hudson, we have provided written conditions which are in your packet, and we'll review those. In my notes, the one additional discussion point that I think that we are open to exploring, I'm not sure what the solution yet is to explore some level of guest parking, even though the streets may, you know, maybe between now and the city council, we can talk to the fire department, maybe that there is enough guest parking just on the street. But I think that was the one thing. Until we have an answer, I'm short to say, and I guess we have to write it down anyways, to say, hey, that's a condition we want to include. But I think from a good faith effort, we certainly will explore that. The other conditions, I think,
Well, I think
I'm not
the other
aware.
one is,
I'm not aware that we've changed any.
is to clarify if the community park is open to the general public or for the use of the residents. I think you've conceded that it should be open to the public, but that's not what the resolution says. It's indefinite, so.
I'm not a lawyer, but I'll pretend it because I watch them on TV. Those are my favorite shows. But we're amending an already approved by both the city and the applicant conditional rezoning, and that was covered and agreed on in the conditional rezoning, and we're not suggesting any changes to it. So my assumption is that easement language and everything else, I mean, the attorney certainly would have a stronger opinion than I, but we're not proposing any changes to that.
My understanding is not that in the original conditional zoning that it was decided whether it's open to the public or not. I think you've agreed it should be, and it will be, but I'm just saying the resolution maybe should be modified to reflect what we all understand.
Mr. Hudson, how about if the resolution says something along the lines of, you know, based on the representations made by the applicant today, the following matters will be considered for amending the conditional rezoning, which will be presented to council, and then you can list the items that you're concerned about. Does that satisfy?
It's a little ambiguous when you said make a reference to. It should be more specific. If we've agreed upon something, well, if we have not agreed upon something, we've discussed it, and the petitioner has offered, in my understanding, that it would be open to the public, for instance. I'm just concentrating that one item. Should be reflected, not we should be considered in a resolution. Make a decision on that. It is either open to the public or it is not.
Do you, what if you said something along the lines of the, you know, applicant recognizes that the original conditional rezoning reflects that the trail will be open to the public and easements will be granted to the city where, if and where necessary?
The original did not say that.
No, it does. I cited the language, Article 3, 3.4.
Article 3.
Article 3, 3.4, 11.
And to clarify that, I don't believe that was part of the original resolution. It was part of the,
There's the original conditional rezoning.
Yeah.
I haven't got it in front of me, so I can't
go ahead, Ms.
say yes or no.
Parakis.
Well, I don't even think that, unless I missed it in our packet, I don't think we have a copy of the conditional rezoning agreement that you're referencing. So I guess I think I understand what Mr. Hudson is saying, and I agree with them that I don't think we should mention at all the if it's open to the general public. It's already been agreed that it's open to the general public. Why are we even talking about it? It's in the agreement. We're not amending that, so let's not bring it up. As I look at the list, the only thing that we need to include is number 1, provide the conditional rezoning agreement that's been amended. Number 2 and 3 can be combined, and we can say, after we talk to the fire department, if there is street parking on one side of the street, I would be in favor of saying that's sufficient parking and let's not worry about it, and install the signage. That would be how I would propose the resolution. And then we already confirmed the material of the trail. It hasn't changed. I mean, I believe that was part of the original thing, that it's asphalt and concrete in the neighborhood and asphalt in the back. We've already clarified all that, and it's in I think it's in there. So. And provide the long-term maintenance plan for the community park. I wrote in my notes that you had already said that the homeowner association already maintains the park in perpetuity. So all that I think is already in there, which does beg the question of why it's in our resolution, although the photometric plan is the one thing that I'm not sure about.
I don't know, one of the, Mr. Carlisle or Mr. Savin, or Ms. Dufresne want to respond to?
Yeah, it's in the resolution because there was, when we did the site plan review, those were issues that we wanted to clarify. Okay. And we've clarified them, I believe. We've clarified all those issues. So we can amend the resolution to something that's satisfactory to the city attorney.
All right.
Did we hear a photometric?
I don't
think I heard the answer to that.
At this time, we are not proposing streetlights, again, because it's a compact neighborhood with 14 homes, both with porch lights and predictably sconce lights on the garages. We feel that that'll be enough ambient light without making it too bright.
So there will be no need for a photometric plan then?
Those lights aren't required, so therefore a photometric plan isn't required.
Okay, good. All right. Mr. Beekner, then Mr. Fox.
I heard you say that the trails would be maintained by the city?
Yes.
Did I hear you right?
Yes, that's correct. Yes.
Mr. Savanon, is that normal or is that okay? Or
That's normal, yes.
the other thing I'll just say, I'm torn on this one. I like your plan. I love the green space. I love the trails. I love the less density. I think it's going to help from a water issue. I'm nervous about the parking, even though it meets the code. I'm nervous about the safety side of that with a potential fire truck coming down there with cars will park wherever they want to. Mr. Krent brings up a good point. Parties happen all the time. I find a lot of, and then if we go with the impervious, then you lose a bunch of trees. If you go to the north side with it, you get the people on that side maybe bummed out, or the people on the south. And then you get snow plowing trying to go over gravel. I know that's a tricky one. So I'm glad I'm not in your shoes, because you got a lot of things you're trying to figure out right now.
I will suggest that we'll look at, and I haven't talked to Joe and Richard and their team yet, but potentially one suggestion for parking may be is on those 2 Ts. Right now, we're proposing parking on one side of the street. This would ultimately be up to the fire department, but perhaps those roads can become, it might be as little as 2 feet wider, which would allow us parking on both sides of those, since they're not through lanes, but would still allow a fire truck to turn. I don't know if that's possible from an engineering point of view. I wouldn't necessarily offer that as a condition, but I think we are committed to exploring options, and that might be a way to at least get, some additional additional parking on street, on both sides of the street, that really doesn't impact the flow of traffic or fire safety, but we'll look at that.
Mr. Chairman, just my other thought is just interesting is we've been pushing for trails as long as I've been for longer than I've been on the commission, but now we've got residents saying we don't want the trails, so I'm a little torn.
Well, I think his comment was not that he was opposed to trails, he was opposed to it being connecting to his neighborhood to the trail, so I think that was his concern,
Yeah.
so. All right, Mr. Fox, I believe you had a question.
Yeah, well, and I guess I don't know if we're in the discussion phase, if we're still talking amongst the board, but or amongst the commission. I want to thank Mr. Sabanat for coming back and retouching on the missing middle definition, because it really helped, gave me a good word, attainable, that I was kind of struggling for. You know, I completely agree with what the commission has said in regards to parking, concerns about, you know, too many people being on the site, et cetera. Another reason that I'm currently leaning towards no recommendation on this is because I would like to see, because I think this current build has done a great job at hitting the one single target demographic. But my understanding of missing middle is that it's supposed to be something that both older folks and younger folks can attain. So I would like to see something with potentially some duplexes or some kind of mix of some variability in the housing that isn't just aimed at a single niche demographic.
All right, any questions or resolution maybe? Yes, Ms. Malahali.
Just a comment. Can we postpone our vote on this till we get more clarity regarding parking and also regarding the fire truck movement?
You can make a motion to postpone if you'd like.
I am leaning more towards that. I like the project, but those are the two issues that still are sticking out for me. Because parking, all of us agree, they need to look into it. Although even the fire department has to look into the movement of the fire truck here. I think we don't have those two pieces fully clear. That's the only reason I would propose a postponement on the vote.
Mr. Epping, did you want to respond to that?
If I may, Mr. Chairman, I respect that, and again, I think, you know, we're here almost every month, so we have a habit of doing what we say we're going to do because we've got to come back and look at you in the eye again, and so we are committed to looking at that. At the same time, in terms of postponement, we're always anxious to keep things moving. We know that as it stands now, just off-street, we double the ordinance requirement. Now, I certainly appreciate what's the real world like, but we know that we double the ordinance requirement just with 2 in and 2 out. And again, the fire department approved the previous plan with parking on one side of the street, so with the same street, so we would anticipate that they'll do that again. Obviously, I can't speak for them, but so that might be as much as 3 spots, additional spots outside of there, in addition to the ordinance, you know, making quite a substantial thing. So it's not unusual, but it's rare that every house in the neighborhood has a party at the same time. So it's, if I have, you know, a baby shower, you know, I might bring 10 cars, but it's unlikely that someone else will also have 10 cars at the same time. It happens, but there are alternatives. So we will look at that. I would, I guess, respectfully request that we be allowed to explore that, but not postpone a vote would be my request, respectfully, only because we do exceed the ordinance at this point.
Thank you. Mr. Hudson, you had your hand raised?
Well, yeah, I was ready to support a motion to postpone, but maybe I'm anal in this, but I think this is just sloppy language in the resolution, because it recommends to the Planning Commission the following. You know, recommend, what's that mean? Take a look at it. Doesn't require. If it's covered in the first amendment or the first original plan, fine. I haven't seen it. I'm not sure it does. But I'm hesitant to postpone this project. I like this project. It's a good project.
Thank you. Mr. Krent.
You know, on page 6 in the documents, which is page 32 in our agenda, it lists all of the conditions voluntarily given by the applicant. And of course, none of it mentions any extra parking. He didn't volunteer. He suggested that he could widen that T area. I think that's a good suggestion. But it's not, they have to volunteer that to us. We can't make requirement, you know, we can make, our recommendations hold no water, basically, what it comes down to. So if they voluntarily offer a condition, then we can prove those conditions. And I don't know if I legally can ask him, do you want to add any more conditions?
I'm not authorized to add condition. I will say that we share the same goal of building a successful neighborhood as you do. And so I think we'll look at that. What's neat about the conditional rezoning is it doesn't preclude us to do more, right? Any site plan, you're essentially establishing the minimum requirements. We're always encouraged to exceed those, and we'll look at it from the operational, you know, building a successful neighborhood. And if that's what we determine we need, we'll work with the final permit drawings and everything to include those and keep you updated. But as it relates to kind of the minimum standard, I think we exceed that, but we share your goal to make it successful.
Okay. Yeah, I want it to be successful, and so do you.
Yeah, exactly.
So, yeah, so I have, you know, I'm in favor of voting for it with the conditions they offered, because we can't add any conditions anyway.
Yes, Ms. Parakis.
I'm prepared to go ahead and make the resolution. I do just want to state that we have talked about parking ad nauseum on this commission, and it just shocks me that when we were talking about high rises where there wasn't even one spot for residents and they had to walk, you know, a quarter of a mile to find a spot with their groceries, nobody seemed to have any problem. And these houses have 5 spots, and we're worried about it. If you want to live on the street, you know if you're going to have a party that you're going to have an issue. It's not going to change anyone's mind whether or not they're going to move into this house. So the parking doesn't bother me at all, frankly. So I'm going to go ahead and move, resolve that the Planning Commission hereby recommends to the City Council that the proposed request to amend the conditional rezoning agreement and site plan located on the east side of Livernois, north of Big Beaver, within Section 22, being approximately 9.5 acres in size, be granted for the following reasons. 1, the request complies with the master plan. 2, the conditions offered by the applicant reasonably protect the adjacent properties. 3, the rezoning would be compatible with surrounding zoning and land use. 4, the site can be adequately served with municipal water and sewer. Be it further resolved that the Planning Commission recommends the following site plan design considerations. Please explore, number 1, provide conditional rezoning agreement prior to the City Council consideration. Number 2, please explore additional guest parking after determining with the fire department whether parking is permitted on both sides of the road.
Is that your resolution then?
That is my
Or I
resolution.
get a second? Anybody need to feel they have to add something to that? Mr. Beekner?
I second that.
Okay, all right.
Did the photometrics need to get mentioned?
No, because they're
Okay,
not going to,
okay.
they're not adding those, so. Ms. Dufresne, is that resolution kosher?
Yes.
Okay, good. Any discussion on the resolution? The only thing I wanted to say is the last time this plan came, I voted no on it because I didn't think it was entirely compatible with the neighbors to the south, but I believe this is a much better plan, so I will be voting yes on it. I guess we're ready for the roll call.
Mr. Krent?
Yes.
Mr. Lambert?
Yes.
Ms. Malala-Holly?
Yes.
Ms. Parekis?
Yes.
Mr. Tagle?
Yes.
Mr. Baker?
Yes.
Mr. Faison?
Yes.
Mr. Fox?
No.
Mr. Hudson?
Yes.
Is that a yes, Mr. Hudson?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, thank you. Okay, motion carries.
All right, thank you. All right. This goes on to City Council. I'm sure Mr. Savant will keep you in the loop on when it comes to the City Council meeting, so. All right, next on the agenda is public comment for items on the agenda. Is there anyone that would like to address the commission for an item on the agenda? Okay. Then we will move on to public commission comment. Well, I guess we'll start down with Ms. Zarnicki. You have any comments you'd like
I
to
have
make?
none, thank you, Mr.
Okay.
Chair.
Mr. Fox.
I just wanted to take a second to thank city staff for the report that was provided in regards to the ice arena and different sustainability efforts being put in there. I'm really excited to see all the different aspects that are going into the build, the rain gardens, getting rid of invasive plant species. Honestly, it was really fantastic and really helpful, so thank you.
Ms. Mahahi.
I second Mr. Fox on that. Yes, the report really was such a positive feeling reading it through and getting to see how much can be done with just one project and how this could be the beacon that we need to now look into all other future projects or any other redevelopments that city is looking into doing. So yeah, thank you for sending that our way. I appreciate it very much.
Mr. Hudson.
Probably a year or two ago, I complained bitterly about our old school parking lot being turned into a green pasture for the deer to enjoy a meal. But I've seen this project now that's ripping up the street out there, and I hear the machines all the time. I think in the long run, that was a good deal. That's a good spot for it, and the deer are just going to have to move a little further if they want a meal.
Your backyard.
They're there already.
Mr. Faison.
Nothing for me.
Ms. Parakis.
Nothing, just except to echo what Mr. Fox and Ms. Malala-Holly said about the public space.
Mr. Krant.
Nope.
Mr. Tagle.
I'm fine, thank you.
Ms. Dufresne.
I'm all set, thank you.
Mr. Savadan.
I'm sorry, I have a couple things.
Oh, that's fine.
So when I write resolutions like that, so just to give you where I'm coming from, it's a potential resolution. You can use it if you want. If you don't, you're the board. I don't vote. So it's done just to try to assist you. So when Mr. Carlisle does his review and he's got issues, if I don't add the issues in the resolution, someone's going to say, why didn't you add the issues in the resolution? And if I do add them and they're discussed, then it's like, why did you put them in there? So I can't predict how discussions are going to go. So we do our best. Sometimes they're sloppy like tonight. It is what it is. I serve on the Township Planning Commission where I am, and we don't have resolutions that help us that are included. So some meetings I'm glad that we don't have a draft resolution because you don't know how the meeting's going to go. Some meetings I wish we had them. There's no right answer, but I think at the end of the day it was a good resolution, so we got there. Secondly, I get requests from planning commissioners who send me articles to forward to the planning commission. And some planning commission members get the articles and go, wow, this is great. I can't wait to read this article. And other planning commission members say, why are you sending me these articles? So I don't want to necessarily be in a position where I'm sending information to some of you. I think it should be all of you or none of you. But so when I get, I guess I don't want to talk about it tonight because it's already 8:38, but maybe there's a different way to do this. Maybe we post them online, recommended reading as per the planning commission or something. I don't know what the answer is, but I just want to do what's reasonable for everybody. And I don't think that sending every article to everyone when not everyone wants them is reasonable. So I'm open to suggestions. Just think about, I don't want to prolong this, but think about what we can do. Thank you.
I got a solution for you. Send them out. Somebody doesn't want to read them,
Don't read it.
don't read it.
I would say the same thing. More information for both those issues. More information is better than none.
Is that
If you don't wanna read
consensus?
it, don't read it.
Well, with an added caveat, if there's anyone who is worried about it, maybe put FYI or something at the top so we know it's not required reading.
Okay.
Like just if you're interested type label.
Is that consensus from everyone?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Carlisle, anything?
No comments.
The only thing I had was a question. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to watch your presentation that you did last week because I was teaching a class. Is that available? Is there a recording available of your presentation you made?
Oakland, yeah, there is. Oakland County makes that available. It's available now. If you YouTube it, you can find it.
Okay.
Mr. Chair.
It's worth watching.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I'm sorry, I totally forgot to mention that. I should have mentioned that on my time, but it was fantastic. I really enjoyed watching it, and I would say it's worth everyone to watch it. Brenda, Mr. Savedant does a great job.
I echo the
Wow,
comment.
thank you.
And I thought you, I thought you covered a lot of information in a short period of time about what is a viable project and what is not. So I thought you framed it very well. So.
Thank you.
Unless there's anything else, we are adjourned.
Alrighty.